be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be in jail, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I am black, beautiful, proud. I must be respected. I must be protected. I am somebody. Right on.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of State of the Water. Today we're going to honor the memory and pay tribute to the giant, the icon, the Reverend, everyone's friend, inspiration of hope, but none other than our Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. Reverend Jackson Sr. passed away last week, Tuesday. He was 84 years of age. Reverend Jackson, of course, according to BBC News, tributes across the world poured out for a person who was definitely seemed to be larger than life, but every bit down to earth. BBC says that according to his family, they say that it's with profound sadness that we announced the passing of the civil rights leader and the founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Honorable Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson Sr., who the family said died peacefully. With this, it says the cause of his death has not been released, but Jackson had been diagnosed with progressive supranuclear palsy, which is PSP, and was in the hospital late last year. Tributes poured in for the prominent activists that ran twice for the Democratic nomination for president. With that, we find that it is a situation where many loved him. Also, many disliked him. Many feared him because he stood up for a lot of people that did not have hope. You heard the intro. It's different from our intro that we usually have. It was his speech where he was saying, I am somebody. I am somebody. And with that, we find where being with he said, I am somebody. It's kind of reminiscent of one of his rhymes. He had speeches that were rhythmic. He had speeches that had meaning. He had speeches that had depth to it. I think about him in different eras of my life. He was with us in this role as a prominent civil rights leader. Of course, we know him, seeing him first with Martin Luther King Jr. And, of course, the famous picture where we see him standing with Martin Luther King Jr., where he's shot and killed at the Lorraine Hotel. And being there, he's standing there. And he's one of two that are standing close to him. And it seems like the mantle fell upon him. Once he took up the reign, once Dr. King was assassinated, it seemed like the Reverend Jesse Jackson took the reins, took the baton, and ran for justice, ran for hope, ran for equality, ran for equity. He broke a lot. Reverend Jackson broke a lot of barriers. Not only, we go back, he was an HBCU graduate, of course, North Carolina A&T. They released a statement in honor of him and, of course, his wife as well, where they released a statement saying that Reverend Jesse Jackson, class of 64, his wife, Jacqueline L.B. Jackson, class of 67. They show a picture of both of them. But it says, civil rights icon, presidential candidate, and beloved alumnus of North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, or North Carolina A&T. The Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. passed away. He was 84 years old. According to the Chancellor James R. Martin, he said, Aggie Nation mourns the loss of our friend, an international force for equality and justice. The Chancellor went on to say that the indelible mark he left on our university, and indeed on all of us, is deeply felt this morning. He says, our hearts and prayers go out to the Jackson family and to all who knew him and benefited from his life's work. It also goes on to say, born in Greenville, South Carolina, Jackson transferred to North Carolina A&T from the University of Illinois Champaign in the 1960s, shortly after A&T's forced legendary sit-in protests at the Greensboro Woolworths electrified the civil rights movement. Now, already a civil rights activist, Jackson quickly established himself as a campus leader, ultimately becoming student government president, even as the quarterback of the Aggie football team, his athlete. And he also was a brother of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, one of the legendary Divine Nine Black Greek-led organizations. And eventually, he was a chapter president. Just reading a little bit more about him, because we know him as the civil rights icon, but a little bit more about his education. He graduated in 1964 with a Bachelor of Science in Sociology. He moved north to Chicago, went there to the Theological Seminary before being ordained as a minister. In 1965, he went to Selma, Alabama to march with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and became a worker in King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC. He was with King in 1968, as I mentioned before, in Memphis, Tennessee, Lorraine Hotel, when King was assassinated. You can see him on the balcony in those images. But he found Chicago branch of Operation Breadbasket, which was the economic arm of the Southern Christian Leadership Coalition. And with that, conference. And in 1966, he served as the organization national director from 67 to 71. In 1971, Jackson founded Operation Push, which is what we know him for, and the Rainbow Coalition, People United to Save Humanity, Chicago-based organization where he advocated self-help and achieved broad audience for his progressive humanitarian views. He goes on to say a lot about his life. I'm not going to go through all of it, but just point out a couple of things about him. He said that he 84, he established the National Rainbow Coalition, which sought equal rights for African Americans and others oppressed minorities. And between these two organizations, he merged them in 1996 to form the Rainbow Push Coalition. And I think this is very important as well. He was the first black man to run for the U.S. presidency in 84 and 88, winning 4 Democratic primaries, caucuses in the first race, and 11 in the second. He came in second both times. The second time to Michael Dukakis, who became the nominee, of course, and it was the governor of Massachusetts at that time. So his breakthrough campaign served as proof that a black leader could be a highly competitive candidate for the highest office in the land, which we know that ceiling was broken by President Barack Obama, but shattered. You know, it was broken by him, but a lot of cracks were put in it by the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. And this is something that we find very interesting. Bill Clinton called him. He said he served as a shadow senator for Washington, D.C. from 91 to 97 and in 2000. President Bill Clinton awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, President Clinton didn't refer to him as that, but that's how he served. That's how people saw him, as that shadow senator. And so many other accolades, for him that he had. Another aspect of, Reverend Jackson is that I remember one of the shows that I watched growing up. One of the shows that I watched growing up was A Different World. A Different World was a spinoff from The Cosby Show. A Different World was the first time myself being in middle school saw kids at the time that I would look up to in a college setting, right? And I saw myself in a college setting. And I saw myself at an HBCU. I ended up graduating 2 times over, undergrad and professional school, Southern University Law Center, working at several HBCUs, and of course now here at Norfolk State University. And because of A Different World, it changed my life. It made my life a different world as well. It happened for my sons also that watched the reruns of A Different World. But I remember Jesse Jackson in a scene in A Different World where he came and lectured. Now, Different World was a TV show, but when that man spoke, it was real. I want you to take a listen at this clip from A Different World where Reverend Jackson speaks about the importance of voting and the impact youth can have and do have on elections. 1989, A Different World.
Earlier today, as I contemplated this lecture tonight, I thought about a young man who had been in a rather sad and melancholy mood, feeling insignificant, impotent, worthless, that he did not count. As I thought about him, it occurred to me that his real problem was he felt that as one person, he could not make a difference. The change in America that's taken place in the last 30 years has occurred because somebody thought that they could make a difference. That's right. The changes did not come from Wall Street, or the White House, or the Congress, the courts. They always started by some young person who thought that they could, in fact, make a difference. Yes. Rosa Parks got on a bus one day. The sign above the driver's head read, "The colored seat from the rear, white seat from the front. Violators will be punished by law." She refused to go to the back of the bus.
Yes, you did.
And she was arrested. Dr. King went to her rescue, a 26-year-old student, and told her, "Better let you walk in dignity than ride in shame." One person can make a difference. In 1957, 9 students at Little Rock Central High in Arkansas went to school one day led by the Army. They refused to bow. They made a difference.
Made a difference.
In the next few years, young America died that we might live. Medgar Evers was killed in cold blood about this right to vote. Sorna Goodman and Cheney, 2 Jews and an African American, were bulldozed to death with their eyes wide open in Philadelphia, Mississippi, about this right to vote. Jimmy Lee Jackson's 15-year-old African American student shot and killed in Marion, Alabama, about this right to vote. 4 darling little girls blown up in the church in Birmingham, Alabama, one Sunday morning, all about the right to vote. They made a difference.
Made a difference. Yes, yes.
You must make a difference. Whenever students are sober and sane and sensitive and put hope in their brains and not dope in their veins, they can always make a difference.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Yes, it can.
Because they died, your generation has the power. John Kennedy was elected by a margin of 112,000 votes. Less than 1 vote per precinct. Everybody counts. Nixon beat Humphrey by 550,000 votes. Carter beat Ford by 1.7 million. Fewer than 3 million votes elected 3 presidents in 16 years. Today, there are 3.2 million high school seniors alone graduating. They should come across that stage with a diploma in one hand and a voter card in the other, because they can make a difference. 12 million college students must vote. You have the power. You must not have the attitude.
Yes.
It's not my aptitude, but my attitude that determines my altitude or how high I will go. My mind is a pearl. I can learn anything in the world. Just because it rains, I don't have to drown. I may have been born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. I can rise above my circumstance. Hands that once picked cotton can now pick presidents. You want to free Mandela and free South Africa? Let's vote about it. Let's vote about it. Let's vote about it.
The passing of an icon, a giant, a kind man, someone who fought for the hope and justice for everyone, equity and equality across the board. It's Stay the Water, and you're joining us for a special tribute as we remember the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. You know, you heard that clip of him in the lecture hall and the emotions. I mean, every time that man spoke, God gave him a gift so powerful that every time he spoke, I didn't see any notes that he read from. It just came out because it was a message that was deep inside of him. You know, I had a chance to meet Reverend Jackson when he came to Newport News, which is where his wife's family's from. Mother-in-law, graduate of Hampton University. And I was invited to come and greet him and serve as a co-host for a community tour that he was doing. Ironically, this was in 2017. This is the last community tour that he did before announcing he had Parkinson's. And I posted a picture on my LinkedIn page and social media at that time. And let me tell you, just being in his presence at that moment and talking with him extensively after the event itself. And from there, he was going through various universities. He stopped over Hampton University, stopped other places, and then went to Richmond. And then he made this announcement at that time. It was very fortunate to be able to not just meet him, but talk with him, be up close, share some laughs. He told some jokes, and after that, it was a moment that I know that I treasured for a long time. Even now, and I think more so of it even now. But he was just that type of person, no matter who you were, no matter what you were doing, whether you were a janitor or you were the CEO, he had the same disposition toward those individuals. And that's something that made him special. But it was also a gift that he had that he used for good and to fight for the hope, for the justice, for the equality and equity for all people. When we talk about his fight and the things that he accomplished, of course, we hear the rhyming of his speeches and so forth. But there were many other things that he did. Jackson, not just a towering civil rights leader, but he was also a diplomat. He was a 2-time presidential candidate. And he expanded the Rainbow Coalition. He formed the Push Rainbow Coalition in 1996, both organizations he founded. And a true champion for social justice. But not just that, but he also secured the release of hostages, and prisoners all around the world. I remember, him doing that. And I remember him going to several places around the world and negotiating the freedom of prisoners in foreign countries that were not kind to the U.S. And here's this black man from Greenville, South Carolina, who went to college at University of Illinois, Champaign, graduated from North Carolina A&T, played ball, became a major figure in civil rights, marched with King, worked first for individuals who couldn't help themselves, forming the Breadbasket arm of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and then eventually forming, of course, what we know now is Push and Rainbow Push Coalition. With that, there he is, negotiating with world leaders. Some call him dictator, but world leaders, to say we want these men and women free. I did some research online, and I'm going to several sources that I found online. And with this, I want to point out several of his accomplishments outside of civil rights. Number one, as a political trailblazer. Think about it. In 1984 and 88, a black man saying that he's going to run for president. Now, keep in mind, Shirley Chisholm did it before, a couple of decades before. She was the first black woman to announce her candidacy for the nomination of president and run on that. She did not get the nomination, but she did it. Jesse Jackson became the first black man not just to run, but run successfully, winning primaries, caucuses. The Democratic Party and the political world had to take him serious once that happened. Not only that, so in 84, 80, and 88. In 88, he won 11 primaries and caucuses and finished second. 11. Think about that. We only have 50. He won 11. That means the others won 39. But he won 11. Tremendous international diplomacy. Well, let me just stay right there just for a quick second because, politics, that's my area. To win 11 primaries and caucuses, which means that he himself created, he blazed a trail that nobody else blazed. Now, it's easy to go down a trail somebody else cut the trees down. But when you see trees that look like giants and you yourself have to hew them down, fear, trepidation, doubt starts to creep in. But it did not with him. It did not stop him. He did it. And we have not just Barack Obama as our first president, but many others. People talking about Wes Moore out of Maryland. Wes Moore as a great candidate for president. And the list will go on and on. Not just president, but also black men for governor. Doug Wilder did it here in Virginia in 1990-94 when he served. It can happen again. It will happen again. But we have Jesse Jackson to thank for that. In international diplomacy, again, he negotiated the release of hostages, including U.S. Navy Lieutenant Robert Goodman in Syria in 1984. And I remember the American soldiers in Kosovo. That's what I remember in 1989. People don't, remember Kosovo, but how hectic it was. It's very similar to what's happening now between Russia and Ukraine. Those wars lasted years and it caused instability over in Europe. But again, he did that. He got them released. He helped to free them. We also know about his advocacy, of course, in civil rights, but also his impact. Now, think about this. A man of his stature, a man that ended up being able to walk through doors, corporations. He's the one that's walking through these corporate doors saying how many contracts are going to African Americans. He's part of that push to open up, the pocketbooks of corporations where black people spend their money and say, hey, you got to now empower us if we're going to spend money in our communities. You're going to come into our communities. You now have to help our community rise up as well. But he was able to do that. But guess what else he did? He marched in labor rights, marches, voting rights. He marched against apartheid. He visited a lot of schools and engaged with youth. Now, when you talk about marching against apartheid, I met Nelson Mandela when I was in college. He came to Southern University as our commencement speaker. I went to a luncheon with him. I shook his hand. A lawyer and a prince in his country, and a very towering figure as well. Both Jesse Jackson and Nelson Mandela were both very tall, towering figures. But again, he marched for another people in a country where it was very similar to Jim Crow, but worse. But what that was Reverend Jackson. And again, being awarded, the Medal of Freedom and all kind of other accolades, which is, of course, the highest civilian. Being awarded that medal is the highest civilian honor that you can receive. But he was more than that. But as I stated earlier, of all of the accomplishments that he had, he still maintained that charisma. He still maintained that friendliness. He still maintained the ability to speak to the mother who's pushing the mop across the floor of the corporation and go up the elevator and speak with the head, the board members of that corporation, the CEO of that corporation, and move mountains. That is the power of a true champion. Someone that doesn't take advantage of people, but someone who values people. Someone that doesn't dismiss people or disrespect them, but someone who does everything that he can to help them. That was Reverend Jackson. I'm going to close with one of his famous speeches, the 1988 Democratic Convention, the DNC. This is where I believe his greatest mark was made across the world when he said, "Keep hope alive." Once again, I want to thank you for joining us, as you always do, on this special series as we pay tribute to the great late icon, the champion, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. Until next time, be good, be great. God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Jesse Jackson, you don't understand my situation. You'll be on television. You don't understand. I see you with the big people. You don't understand my situation. I understand. You see me on TV, but you don't know the me that makes me me. They wonder why does Jesse run? Because they see me running for the White House. They don't see the house I'm running from. I have a story. I wasn't always on television. Writers were not always outside my door. When I was born late one afternoon, October 8th, in Greenville, South Carolina, no writers asked my mother her name. Nobody chose to write down our address. A mama was not supposed to make it, and I was not supposed to make it. You see, I was born to a teenage mother who was born to a teenage mother. I understand. I know abandonment and people being mean to you and saying you're nothing and nobody and can never be anything. I understand. Jesse Jackson is my third name. I'm adopted. When I had no name, my grandmother gave me her name. My name was Jesse Burns till I was 12. So I wouldn't have a blank space. She gave me a name to hold me over. I understand when nobody knows your name. I understand when you have no name. I understand. I wasn't born in the hospital. Mama didn't have insurance. I was born in the bed at house. I really do understand. Born in a 3-room house, bathroom in the backyard, slop job by the bed, no hot and cold running water. I understand. Wallpaper used for decoration? No, for a windbreaker. I understand. I'm a working person's person. That's why I understand you, whether you're black or white. I understand work. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had a shovel programmed for my hand. My mother, a working woman. Some of the days she went to work early, with runs in her stockings. She knew better, but she rolled runs in her stockings so that my brother and I could have matching socks and not be laughed at school. I understand. At 3 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day, we couldn't eat turkey because Mama was preparing somebody else's turkey at 3 o'clock. We had to play football to entertain ourselves. And then around 6 o'clock, she would get off the Alta Vista bus and we would bring up the leftovers and eat our turkey, leftovers, the caucus, the cranberries, around 8 o'clock at night. I really do understand. Every one of these funny labels they put on you, those of you who are watching this broadcast tonight in the projects, on the corners, I understand. Call you outcast, low down, you can't make it, you're nothing, you're from nobody, subclass, underclass. When you see Jesse Jackson, when my name goes in nomination, your name goes in nomination. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. And it wasn't born in you, and you can make it. Wherever you are tonight, you can make it. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you're qualified and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. On tomorrow night and beyond. Keep hope alive. I love you very much.